races.
So, you know, we're gonna bang right here because we've been competitive gamers. Do you think that has an effect on our influence of we would like things to be more of a meritocracy than, say a pay to win model?
Totally. I mean, I think that sentiment pervades. I mean, obviously, take poker for example, right? The amount of people who wish that poker was a meritocracy. I mean, the best example I can think of is Phil Hellmuth, right? Phil Hellmuth, the most famous person advocating for this idea, famously saying that if poker were a game of skill, pure skill, I would never lose, right? He's famous for saying that.
Yeah, I mean, I know Phil Hellmuth, and the older I get, the higher appreciation I have for him because whatever people think of his shtick, his goal is to keep poker alive as an industry. Like that's his end goal. So whatever his methods, and he's shifted over the years. Like I had a podcast with him. Everyone said he was it was as authentic as possible with me.
Really?
Like compared to his other
I mean, maybe he's
spiels.
changed. I've only had one encounter with the guy ever. It was in, I want to say like 2000. What was the year that Chris Ferguson won the World Series? 2002, 2001.
Chris Moneymaker's 2003.
Chris Ferguson won.
Ferguson
in the final.
2000 or 2001, I think. I'm not
Moneymaker was
sure.
03. I think this was 2000.
Yeah.
I went there, and I was there actually with Matt Place. We both went to go watch the main event, and remember how it was in two stages? They would play at Binion's, like all the early rounds were at Binion's, and then they would move over and play their final round at, I don't remember where the finals were. Yeah. I don't think it was at Binion's, though. Maybe they were still doing it at Binion's then. I don't feel like it was.
I don't remember.
It's not important. Anyway, it was one of the early rounds, and Phil Hellmuth was actually playing, and I was a railbird. I was just watching the action from the side, and I was paying a lot of attention to it. And obviously, he doesn't know me from Adam. I'm just some random guy. But I knew enough about poker at that point that I could understand a lot of the basic strategy. I could certainly watch them play and kind of figure out what they were thinking and what they were trying to do. And they had a dinner break or a rest break or something, and Phil Hellmuth was downstairs talking to a couple of people. And I stood by the side. I was patiently waiting because I wanted to ask him about a specific hand or make a comment about a specific hand that he was in. And after he was done with the two guys, they kind of walked off, and he was just standing there. And I walked up and I introduced myself, and I said, I've read a lot about your poker exploits and stuff, and I saw this particular hand, and I was wondering if you could, either explain to me what you're thinking, or I thought, I asked him a question, and he just looks at me. And he looks over my shoulder, and he just walks past me without saying a word. Just completely ignored me and blew me off completely. And I remember just standing there like utterly astonished, thinking, who the fuck does that? Like, I get, maybe you're in the zone, maybe you're hyper-focused on the task at hand. Maybe you feel you're running poorly or whatever. But like just the general level of just pure naked disrespect, to just disregard me completely and pretend like I didn't even exist when I was asking this question. I was so disgusted, and it completely just colored how I felt about poker pros and poker celebrities going forward from that point onward. I thought to myself, sure, yeah, these guys play this game I had no money at this point in my life still. So I was completely in awe of the stakes that they played for. And sure, they play hands for tens of thousands of dollars at a time. Like it's astronomical, it's unthinkable to me. But these people are not worthy of my respect, because I know who I am, and I know about my own intelligence and aptitude at gaming. And I mean, objectively, most of these guys are probably not as skilled gamers as I am. I'm pretty certain of that. I don't know how good Phil Hellmuth is. It's really hard for me to even assess that.
He specializes in multi-table tournaments, and I give him more respect in that area than most people, but that's besides the point.
Yeah, I mean, obviously the impression that he has online, overtly in videos of him and stuff, is that he's a big donkey, that he's just like, looks like he's just constantly tilted because of emotions, and he's constantly trying to make big moves that people just read him perfectly, and he gets crushed, and he's bitter as hell.
Clearly media manipulated, but
obviously, yes. It's obviously narrative, and of course he's played to that, right? He understands there's value in being the heel too.
Yes.
Any guy that's going to like have himself brought out on like a throne or whatever for a game, like the crazy stunts that he's pulled, right? He understands that there's definitely value to be extracted in that reputation, rightfully so. And you certainly can't argue with.
And very fair to him, we are not his target demographic, so there's that too.
Yeah. What is his target demographic anyway?
His target demographic. Okay, so I think he doesn't want his cover blown, yet wants the respect. Like, so this is why I think he was. I know what he does. When Barry Greenstein wrote in his book that Hellmuth is good against bad players, but bad against good players, this is kind of what it is. I've played with him in cash games. I never played with him in tournaments, but I watch him interact, and this is how he gets an extra edge in multi-table tournaments. If you or I, who are mostly polite, are dealt the same cards over and over, whatever, it plays out. But if you agitate your opponent who doesn't have emotional control,
Yeah.
he will, like, his opponent will punt to him or just be off, and he will just like have that part of his game like, honed. So that is where he gets an extra edge, where if somebody punts off to him but doesn't punt off to you or me, wow, dude, you do increase your chances of doing well in the tournament significantly.
Yeah, no, I totally. I mean, that's obviously the Mike Long strategy. I don't know if you ever played against Mike Long, but
I think I did once, but like it was
I,
very
I never, I
uneventful.
never encountered any player in my entire career playing Magic over 26 years who ever threw me off my game more than him. No one even close. He was the only person generally that I dreaded playing against, and who I would feel would genuinely rattle me emotionally when I played against him. The only player that could do
What
that.
did he do?
Well, I have
He
a
never.
famous story. I have a famous story I can relate to you about that. And I forgot. I honestly will have to get back to it, but I forgot why we were talking about Phil Hellmuth. Why I wandered off talking about him. Do you remember?
Um, your disdain for the poker players, but the thing is, that part of them, that part of their attitude, is like part of their part of their game. Whereas our game development came from a desire of meritocracy. Like if you are the
Oh,
best,
yeah, it relates to that question. Yeah. So we'll get back to the question. We'll just keep that on
yeah,
the back burner, the meritocracy thing. Yeah, because that's obviously
poker. The thing is, like when Phil Hellmuth says he's the greatest of all time, and he believes it, the thing is, like he's playing his own game. One, in his mind of meritocracy, the only thing that really proves the best poker player of all time is multi-table tournaments and therefore bracelet events. Because even in the podcast, and I totally agree with him, it is really hard to judge who the best cash game player is because not all fields are equal. Obviously, for somebody like you and me who care more about, I mean, we would love to have the titles, but we're playing poker for money, so we care about the cash more. But Phil Hellmuth's poker legacy is very important to him personally for many reasons. And I think you and I at least have the appreciation that with the games that we participate in, we would like whatever we contributed to be acknowledged. So he wants that acknowledgement of being the greatest poker player of all time, but on his terms, which are multi-table tournaments, bracelets, keeping the game alive, being in poker history. And I think that when people diss him, one, he's been portrayed in media unfairly in a sense that a lot of the hands that are on video are the entertaining ones where he blows up or, whatnot.
Yeah, obviously there's huge confirmation bias involved in the production of those.
Right. And on at least Live at the Bike, I have seen him like outweigh people or whatever. Cash games are not a specialty. But in the context of his definition of greatest poker player of all time, he actually fits that caveat in which if you're trying to define him in a different sense, easily he's not the best player of all time. So one thing that poker does as a game versus Magic has a little bit of component, as you showed with Mike Long, is you're trying to break parity. You don't want the meritocracy. You're trying to find whatever you can do, whether it's strategically, verbally, gestures, whatever, in an ethical sense,
right,
to break parity. And he does that. Like, definitely people like Antonio Esfandiari and Phil Hellmuth and, Phil Locke, their speech play attempts to break this parity.
Interesting.
So that's something that we, as even though it's a very small component of Magic, live Magic, for the most part, you want to be known. You personally want to be known in Magic as a theorist, deck builder, and execution, not so much the manipulation.
Right, exactly.
You do have part of that in you, though. But that's
Yeah,
why. Yeah, go ahead.
No, I was going to say you're totally right about that. I mean, I think obviously doing things within the confines of the rules, you're obviously familiar with the term angle shooting, and you have to be careful about walking that line between strategy, getting into your opponent's head, manipulation, and overt angle shooting, right? And I think that probably it's somewhere in between the getting in your opponent's head and actually angle shooting where you start to fall into territory where most people would consider that, well, I mean, reputable or disreputable conduct, to the point where people would start to really frown on you as a player and as a person. And I don't know if, I don't think that I would qualify or classify any of Phil Hellmuth's shenanigans as angle shooting.
Exactly.
They're not. They're definitely within the confines of the game. And certainly, I mean, acting tilted about stuff, berating people for their play. Sure, it makes you look like an asshole, but you're right. In a game where you are trying to extract every dollar of potential equity, because it can't just be a meritocracy. Obviously, it can't be, because then it's just a zero-sum game in the long run. You do need to exert some sort of thing. I mean, in the case of Magic, for example, I've got them right here. To this day, when I play old school, these are two 20-sided dice.
Yeah.
These two dice, not these exact two, but two dice play an integral part of my strategy to this day, because the physical aspect of manipulating a 20-sided die in terms of what you can project to your opponent and how much you can get people to actually block or not block or take damage or do whatever by just literally picking up a die and adjusting it. It's profound, actually, the effect that this can have on people, where you say, I'm going to attack you for 2, and you reach over and you just pick their die up and you start to turn it. And that this is not demonstrative of anything, right? They have to legally declare a block, and then there's time to do everything. But when you pick the die up and you start to turn it, they get fixated by that, and they start thinking, damn, I don't really want to take 2. Like, he's picked up the die. Or that's awfully presumptuous of him to pick the die up and start turning. I haven't even declared a block yet. Fuck yeah, I'm going to block, which is exactly what you want them to do, which is why you picked up the die in the first place. And they don't even realize that you did that was an overt choice. I specifically picked the die up because I'm trying to induce them to block, and I want them to resent the fact that I picked the die up. That's like a little sort of intangible thing that's obviously within the confines of the rules completely. It's not angle shooting. There's no cheating going on there, but clearly there's some degree of manipulation going on there, even if it's rather covert. And I guess, so Phil Hellmuth's strategies are kind of in line with that. And I can totally understand that. I can totally get it. I just, obviously from my perspective, that's not how I would ever try to eke out an advantage.
Right. Because of our background, and we don't view like.
Well, particularly on the subject of legacy, what kind of legacy is he trying to have? You know, does he want to be infamous and known for all time as one of the most abrasive, awful people who ever sat at a poker table and made countless opponents just feel horrible?
He's fairly proud of that, but that's not so much like, if you listen to all his dialogue, and I'm wondering how many people are actually going to listen to this that, you know, also have the crossover. But what's important to him are bracelets, longevity, what people are like, whether he could say he's the greatest, and actual performance. If that is his criteria, and he's, you know, relatively proud of being a brat, so call that irrelevant. Yeah. Because I think that if being kind and not abrasive was the correct strategy, he's happy to do that too. I've seen a nice side to him that other people may not have seen. Whatever the case is, under those four criteria, which, you know, longevity is a huge one, because that's something that's hard for, you know, poker players in general.
Yeah, I mean, to me, it seems like a crazy thing to want to do with your life for 30 years or 40 years. I mean, it's just...
That's right. That's for us, but he's been passionate about it for, like, you know, when you were playing Street Fighter and then Magic and then, you know, Diablo.
Hellmuth was playing poker the whole time, of course.
Yeah, Hellmuth's been playing the whole time. So in the context of his definition, and I'm not even sure it's like that off, he really is like one of the greats. Like, there's no...
Indisputably, yes, of course.
I just mean under his own definition.
I think I know the definition definition he would fit. I mean, does he have the most bracelets still? He does, right?
He has 15, yeah.
Then it's indisputable, honestly. That's the biggest litmus test, I think, of someone truly being great, is how many gigantic events have you won? Because it's not like you can just play in every event and you're just accumulate bracelets over time, right? That's not how it works.
There's one caveat to that, which is when people are sponsored, especially like Daniel Negreanu, so you could just keep spamming tournaments, then yeah, that's kind of messing with stuff. But that's the thing. That's why, you know, a poker career isn't so much of a meritocracy, because there are so many things that make it that it's not a fair competition. And whether it's like talk, play, strategy, there's a lot of stuff to manipulate things because your whole goal is to break parity.
Yeah. Well, on the subject of meritocracy in games, getting back to that initial point that you made, I think that there is definitely a tendency among cerebral, skilled lifestyle players. There's always this tendency to sort of drift in that direction over time, particularly because once you develop prodigious skill at something, be it poker or magic or whatever, it engenders a degree of expectation about the outcome of every single game you play. You start to have the expectation. You transition, particularly when you're learning something that people already understand better than you because they've been doing it longer. You start out with this expectation, like, I'm just going to have fun, I'm just going to do this, and I'm going to learn it. And then gradually you transition, once you gain aptitude at that, you transition over to starting to have the expectation that you should win more than your fair share of games. As you get very, very good at something, that gives way to being almost a sense of entitlement, right?
Yes,
I deserve to win these games now, right? I not only expect to, but I deserve to, because I put in the time. I know this better than anyone. These are the kind of things you hear Phil Hellmuth saying at the table, right? Which makes him so distasteful to so many people. I deserve to win this. I'm entitled to win this. And if there's one thing that people generally react to universally badly, it's a sense of entitlement. People generally can't stand people who act entitled. The problem is that when you really have spent and put in the time, it's hard to not feel entitled to a certain degree to the wins.
I agree. Yeah.
And that